The first gunshot of Tabitha Morrow's wedding day tore the brass guard from Dale Rusk's revolver and sent the weapon spinning across the courthouse steps. Rusk struck the rail with his shoulder. A bright line opened across 2 fingers where broken metal had cut him, but the bullet itself had passed clear of flesh. Tabitha knew because she had chosen the shot. She stood 3 paces below him in a gray traveling dress, the walnut-gripped revolver steady in her right hand, its muzzle angled away from the knot of townspeople gathering beneath the August sun. At Rusk's feet lay the leather case that held her mother's silver-backed mirror. He had taken it from her trunk after Malcolm Wren told him to move her belongings into the livery before the vows. Tabitha had asked once for its return. Rusk had laughed, put the case beneath his arm, and reached for his holster. Now the courthouse yard had gone still except for a horse stamping beside the hitching rail. "Don't touch that gun," Tabitha said. Rusk stared at the revolver on the boards. "You shot me." "No, I stopped you from shooting me." "She's mad," Malcolm called from the top step. He stood beside the justice in a dark coat, better suited to church than late summer heat. "Sheriff." Boots struck the boardwalk from the direction of Main Street. The man who came through the crowd wore a dust-marked hat, a plain badge, and the balanced stride of someone accustomed to horses, weapons, and men who mistook noise for authority. His revolver was already drawn. He did not point it at the loudest person. He studied the ground first, Rusk's fallen gun, the bent brass, the mirror case, Tabitha's stance, the splintered edge of the courthouse rail. Then his gaze settled on the revolver in her hand. "Keep the muzzle where it is," he said. His voice carried without rising. "It is where I intend it to remain." Malcolm descended 1 step. "Reed, she fired on my foreman without warning." "Did you see the draw?" the sheriff asked. "I saw her shoot him." "That wasn't the question." A freight clerk near the rail removed his cap. "Rusk drew first, Sheriff." An egg seller standing beside a wagon nodded. "He did." The lady told him to give back her case. He reached for his gun. Rusk pressed his injured hand against his vest. "They're mistaken." "Both of them?" Reed asked. They saw confusion. "I saw his thumb catch the hammer," Tabitha said. Reed's attention returned to her. He took in the gray dress, the travel dust along its hem, and the empty leather strap where the mirror case had hung from her trunk. "Who taught you to shoot like that?" "My mother, after a deputy took her pistol and my father died with his hands tied." The sheriff's revolver lowered first, not to his holster, not yet, but away from her body. The movement was small enough that no one else seemed to understand it. Tabitha did. "Lower yours," he said, slowly. "Will your deputy take it from me?" "I have not called my deputy." "Will you? Not unless I need him." His answer gave her no promise beyond the next breath. It was still more honest than reassurance. Tabitha eased the hammer down and lowered the revolver until it pointed at the ground beside her skirt. She did not holster it. Reed did not order her to. He told a boy to fetch the doctor, then instructed Rusk to move away from the fallen weapon. Rusk obeyed only after Reed stepped between him and the gun. Malcolm's face had reddened beneath the brim of his hat. "This woman came here under false pretenses. She concealed a weapon. She attacked a man employed by me, and now she refuses to surrender property intended for my household." "Your household?" Tabitha asked. "The room above the livery was prepared for you. You promised a room above the livery. The distinction is childish. The distinction is that I have not married you." Malcolm turned to the justice. "We have 37 letters. She accepted my offer. She crossed from Nebraska at my expense." "I sold my father's camera stand to buy the rail ticket," Tabitha said. "You paid $6 toward the final fare after I had already committed the rest. You came to become my wife. I came to decide whether I could." The justice glanced toward the closed register on the table inside the courthouse door. No vows had been spoken. No names had been entered. Malcolm's mouth tightened. A decent woman does not travel that distance and change her mind on the steps. A decent man does not claim her trunk before she says yes. A murmur moved through the crowd. Malcolm heard it and hardened. "You wrote that you wanted a home." Tabitha felt the sentence land where his letters had once built one. A north-facing room for portraits, a shelf for glass plates, a table she would not have to clear for another person's supper. He had written that capable women deserved useful work. He had remembered the names of her mother's tools and asked whether the silver mirror had survived the move from Nebraska. She had mistaken attention for regard. "I wanted a home," she said. "I did not agree to become part of your inventory." Reed's eyes moved once toward Malcolm. What did Rusk intend to do with the mirror? Place it with the rest of her effects. Why before the ceremony? Because she was overwrought. "You told him to take it," Tabitha said. "You told him to bring it through the side door of the livery." Malcolm ignored her. "Sheriff, this is a domestic matter." "There is no domestic relation," Reed said. "Not yet." Tabitha crossed the final step toward the justice. Her legs felt steady. That mattered. "There will be none." Malcolm stared at her. "Think before you shame yourself further." "I have thought." She faced the justice. "I will not speak the vows." The justice closed the register. The sound was quiet. Final enough. Malcolm's expression emptied before anger filled it. "Then the room is withdrawn. The allowance is withdrawn. My name is withdrawn. Everything promised in those letters ends now. You cannot withdraw a marriage I refused. You have nowhere to sleep. That is my concern. You will be on the next train east within a week. Then leaving me alone should require little effort." Reed bent and lifted the mirror case from the boards. He did not hand it to Malcolm. He placed it on the courthouse rail between himself and Tabitha. "Whose property was it before the letters?" he asked. "My mother's," Tabitha said. "Can you prove that?" "Yes," Malcolm gave a short laugh. "She can prove nothing." Tabitha stepped nearer the case. 4 bright marks scored the old wood around the backing screws. They had not been there when she wrapped the mirror in Nebraska. One gouge curved where a narrow blade had slipped beneath the frame. Malcolm saw her notice, his gaze fixed not on her face but on the damaged backing. Fear moved through it before he concealed it. Not grief, not humiliation, fear. Reed followed the direction of both their attention. "Has that case been opened since it left your possession?" he asked. "Not by me." Malcolm reached for it. Reed placed one hand over the handle without lifting the case. "No one opens it until Miss Morrow says. You are letting an armed stranger dictate terms in front of the courthouse. She is dictating what happens to her property." Malcolm's hand fell. Tabitha watched him retreat half a pace. He had written 37 letters, offered a room, praised her skill, and urged her to bring the mirror west. He had not brought her across 2 states because he wanted a wife. He had brought her because she carried something he needed. Whatever lay behind the scratched backing, Malcolm Wren had nearly let a man die to possess it. Reed carried the mirror case into the sheriff's office without opening it, and Tabitha followed close enough to see that no hand except his touched the handle. By early afternoon on August 27, the heat had pressed the smell of dust, leather, and horse sweat into every board of the small room. Dale Rusk sat near the wall with his right hand wrapped in fresh linen. The doctor had removed 2 slivers of brass, declared the wound painful but not grave, and told him he would keep all his fingers if he stopped trying to use them before the bleeding settled. Rusk seemed insulted by the mercy. His damaged revolver lay on Reed's desk beside the bent guard and a strip of torn holster leather. The mirror case rested unopened on the shelf behind the chair, visible to everyone. Malcolm Wren watched it more often than he watched Tabitha. Reed set out paper, ink, and a jar of sand. "We begin before the shot," he said. "One person speaks at a time." Rusk went first. He claimed Tabitha had become unreasonable when Malcolm directed him to move her belongings. He said she drew without warning and fired to kill. Reed asked where his hand had been when the shot struck the revolver. "Near my belt. On the grip, I don't recall." "You recall her intent but not your own hand." Rusk's jaw tightened. "Everything happened fast." Reed wrote the answer without comment. Malcolm said Tabitha had concealed a weapon, deceived him about her character, and attacked a man employed to protect his household.
"What household?"
Reed asked. "The one she came west to join." "Was the marriage entered in the register?" "Not yet." "Were vows spoken?" "No, because she created a public disturbance." Reed looked toward the justice, who had taken a chair near the door. "Were vows spoken?" "No," the justice said. Reed returned to the paper. "Then there was no household shared between them." Malcolm leaned forward. 37 letters carry weight. They may carry promises. They do not carry title to her property. The freight clerk gave his statement next. He had seen Rusk take the mirror case after Tabitha demanded it remain with her trunk. He had seen Rusk's thumb hook toward the hammer. The egg seller confirmed the draw and added that Malcolm had made a small motion with his head before Rusk reached for the gun. Reed asked whether she could swear it was an order. No, I can swear he moved and Rusk moved after. Reed wrote only that Tabitha appreciated the refusal to stretch one fact into another. When her turn came, Reed laid a folded cloth on the desk. I need to examine your revolver against the spent chamber, Rusk's weapon, and the shot angle. Every warning May had ever given her returned at once. Never hand a loaded weapon to a man merely because he wears a badge. Never mistake an official tone for lawful cause. Reed did not reach beneath Tabitha's coat. He did not tell her that innocence required obedience. How long? She asked. Until I finish the comparison. It stays in this room and in your sight. Who touches it? Me, the justice may observe. No deputy. And when you finish, I return it, unless these facts give me lawful cause not to. Tabitha drew the revolver slowly, opened the cylinder herself, and placed it on the cloth with the muzzle turned away from every person present. One chamber held a spent cartridge. 5 remained live. Reed waited until her hand moved clear before taking the weapon. He checked the barrel, the cylinder, and the powder marks. Then he laid a straight edge along the torn brass of Rusk's revolver and studied the splintered courthouse rail through the open window line. The bullet struck the weapon and passed beyond it, he said. The injury came from broken metal. She still fired, Rusk muttered. After you drew, the freight clerk replied. Reed continued, as if neither man had spoken. The angle is consistent with Miss Morrow aiming at the revolver, not the body behind it. Malcolm's face hardened. You intend to praise her marksmanship. I intend to record what happened. The justice read the statements, then told Rusk he was to remain in Miles City and appear when called. Before carrying another revolver openly, he would post a peace bond or satisfy the justice that he presented no further threat. Rusk protested that he was the injured party. The justice pointed toward the damaged gun. You may explain that when your hand heals enough to raise it in oath. Reed emptied no cartridges and made no show of authority. He lifted Tabitha's revolver by the barrel, keeping the muzzle in his own direction, and extended the walnut grip toward her. Their hands came within an inch. He stopped there. She chose when to take it. Thank you, she said. It was yours to return, Malcolm rose. You are arming her again. I am returning property after examination. She came here under my protection. Tabitha settled the revolver into its holster. I arrived under my own name. Malcolm turned on her. Then keep it. Keep the gun, the trunk, the mirror, and every burden you carried. The room above my livery is withdrawn. The allowance is withdrawn. My name will not shelter you in this town. He had already said nearly the same thing on the courthouse steps, but inside the office he spoke with witnesses present, as though repetition might make the punishment official. Tabitha felt the loss without allowing him to name it for her. The north-facing room he had described in his letters had never been prepared. The shelves for plates, the work table, the privacy to earn her own money, those had been bait arranged in sentences. You cannot withdraw a marriage I refused, she said, nor a home that never existed. Malcolm's gaze went to the mirror case. You will regret keeping old things you do not understand. Reed rose between them, not touching either. Miss Morrow has given her statement. You may leave. You are choosing the word of a stranger over mine. I am choosing witnessed facts over a claim. Malcolm left with Rusk behind him. Reed brought down the mirror case. Do you want it opened here? Tabitha examined the leather straps and the edge of the wooden frame beneath the wrapping. No. Then it remains closed. He handed it directly to her. Do you want someone present when you collect your trunk? The freight clerk. And a woman who is not connected to Malcolm. Mrs. Henshaw owns the empty portrait rooms near the feed store. She has no patience for Malcolm. That recommends her. Before sunset, the freight clerk rolled Tabitha's trunk from the depot office on a handcart while Mrs. Henshaw walked beside him, spectacles low on her nose and a ring of keys at her waist. The widow owned a narrow two-story building whose upper front room had once been a portrait studio. Dust filmed the north windows, a painted mountain backdrop sagged from one wall, and a camera stand without a camera leaned in the corner. The smaller room behind it could be made dark with cloth and work. $4 a week, Mrs. Henshaw said. Tabitha counted the coins left after rail fare and meals. I can pay $2 now, the balance after my first customer. I will scrub the rooms, patch the blackout curtain, and restore the work table. I keep what the studio earns. Mrs. Henshaw studied the gray dress, the trunk, and the outline of the holster beneath Tabitha's coat. You are the woman from the courthouse. Yes. Did you shoot the man? I shot his weapon after he drew it. Can you repair a light seal? Yes. Mix chemicals without poisoning the floorboards? Yes. Rent due each Monday. $2 tonight, the remainder after your first paid sitting. If you ruin the plumbing, you buy the bucket. Agreed. It was not rescue. It was a contract adjusted to reality. By nightfall, Tabitha had a key, 2 rooms, and less than $1 remaining. She locked the outer door after Mrs. Henshaw, and the freight clerk witnessed the trunk's delivery. Then she placed the mirror case on the old work table. The 4 marks around the backing screws shone brighter under lamplight than the aged scratches along the frame. Fresh. One screw sat a fraction higher than the others. Malcolm, or someone working for him, had already tried to lift the backing before the ceremony. Tabitha loosened the blue cloth around May's mirror, but did not remove the wood. Along one edge beneath the frame, a thin strip of black paper showed where no lining should have been. She reached for a narrow screwdriver left in the work table drawer. Her fingers closed around the handle. Then she stopped. If she opened the backing alone, Malcolm could claim she had hidden whatever lay there after reaching Miles City. He could call the paper false, the object planted, the entire discovery an act of revenge by a rejected bride. Tabitha set the screwdriver down. Waiting was not surrender when the choice belonged to her. She wrapped the mirror again, locked it inside the trunk, and placed the key in the pocket beneath her waistband. Outside, wagon wheels rolled toward the depot, and someone below fastened the street door. Malcolm had taken back the home he promised. In return, Tabitha had found a room with north light, a lock he did not own, and a secret he had failed to reach. Before she opened the backing, she would make certain the truth had witnesses. By breakfast on August 29, Malcolm Wren had found a new name for the mirror, property. He arrived at the portrait rooms with Reed Ashby, the justice, and the confidence of a man who believed repeating a claim before officials could make it true. Mrs. Henshaw stood in the open doorway with her arms folded. Tabitha had not invited Malcolm upstairs, and she did not move aside for him. The silver-backed mirror remained wrapped in May's blue cloth on the work table. Her trunk stood locked against the inner wall. The case was brought west for my household, Malcolm said. Miss Morrow accepted my offer. Whatever she carried for that purpose belongs with the arrangements she abandoned. Which item did you buy? Reed asked. Malcolm glanced toward him. That is not the point. It is the first point. We discussed the mirror in our letters. Did she promise it to you? She promised to bring it. Tabitha rested one hand on the work table. You asked whether I still had it. You asked whether the backing had ever been repaired. You never asked whether I wished to give it away. Malcolm's jaw set. A wife's belongings enter her husband's home. I am not your wife. The justice shifted near the door. No vows were spoken. No marriage was entered. Malcolm turned to him. She crossed from Nebraska under an understanding. An understanding is not a bill of sale, Reed said, nor a marriage. Malcolm looked at the wrapped mirror again. She cannot prove it belonged to her mother. Tabitha unlocked her trunk. She lifted out 2 folded dresses, her dark focusing cloth, and a box of unused plates. Beneath them lay a cabinet portrait wrapped in linen. She carried it to the table by its edges and placed it beside the mirror. May Morrow stood before a painted river backdrop. Younger than Tabitha remembered her, one hand resting against the same silver-backed glass. A crescent-shaped nick showed near the handle. The mark was visible in the old portrait and on the mirror beneath the blue cloth. Mrs. Henshaw adjusted her spectacles. Same nick. My father made that portrait 11 years ago, Tabitha said, before Malcolm Wren knew my name. Reed examined the image without touching it. Then he looked at Malcolm. "You have no marriage, no transfer, and no proof that this mirror was ever yours. A court may hear differently. Then bring a claim supported by more than letters." Malcolm took one step nearer the table. Reed moved just enough to close the path without placing a hand on him. "Until then," the sheriff said, "you do not touch Miss Morrow's property." The room held no applause, only the faint grind of wagon wheels outside and the dry buzz of a fly near the north window. Malcolm's gaze fixed on the mirror backing. "You do not know what you are carrying." Tabitha heard the sentence more clearly than the threat he had intended to wrap around it. "Then tell me." He realized too late that he had said too much. "I mean, old things burden people who mistake memory for value. That is not what you meant. You have already decided what you want to believe." "No, I am asking what you know." Malcolm looked toward Reed, perhaps expecting the sheriff to interrupt. Reed did not. "You brought suspicion into a town where you have no standing," Malcolm said. "Every shopkeeper on this street knows my name." "So do I," Tabitha replied. "That has not improved it." Mrs. Henshaw made a low sound in her throat. Malcolm turned toward the stairs. Before leaving, he gave the wrapped mirror one final look. Not at the silver face, at the screws beneath the cloth. Reed waited until Malcolm's boots struck the boardwalk below. "Do you still want Mrs. Henshaw present when you open it?" he asked. "Yes." "Anyone else?" "No." "Then I will remain at the door." The justice left with Malcolm's rejected claim written in his notebook. Reed did not follow him downstairs. He took his place beside the open entrance, far enough from the work table that Tabitha could move without passing him. Mrs. Henshaw sat in the posing chair, with both hands folded over her apron. Tabitha unwrapped the mirror. The fresh tool marks shone around the old screws. One sat higher than the rest. She fitted the narrow screwdriver into it and turned. The screw came loose with almost no resistance. "Someone worked it before you," Mrs. Henshaw said. "Yes." The second screw held. Tabitha wrapped the handle in cloth and applied steady pressure until the metal gave with a dry rasp. Reed did not offer to take the tool that mattered. Her hands knew delicate work. Strength was useful only when asked for. The last screw came free. Tabitha lifted the wooden backing. Beneath it lay a flat packet wrapped in black paper and tied with thread faded nearly white. Dust outlined its shape against the silvered frame. No fresh hand had placed it there. Mrs. Henshaw leaned closer. "That has been hidden a long while." Tabitha turned the packet over. May's handwriting crossed the paper in narrow, slanted lines. From his returned camera case, developed after they sent his effects home. "Do not let the badge that wrote the report learn this plate survived." The words tightened the room around her. May had worked beside Charles Morrow in the darkroom before Tabitha was tall enough to reach the chemical shelf. Her parents had experimented with the newer dry gelatin plates, coming west through photographic suppliers, plates that could be exposed in one place and developed later, instead of being prepared and washed beside the camera. May had complained that Charles trusted new processes before they deserved it. Yet she had learned every step with him. After his death, she had closed the studio and said only that county men returned his camera case and the mirror together. She had never allowed a lawman to touch the mirror. Tabitha had believed grief made her severe. Now the note gave that severity another name: caution. She cut the old thread and unfolded the paper. A glass negative lay inside, no larger than her hand. One thin crack crossed the upper corner and stopped before the center. Silvering clouded the edges. Near the lower border, 2 scratched lines crossed beneath a small circle. Charles's studio mark. He cut it into plates he meant to keep. Tabitha lifted the glass by the edges and carried it toward the north window. Reversed shapes gathered in the pale light. Dark became bright. Bright became shadow. 3 figures knelt or crouched on open ground. Their arms disappeared behind them. A 4th form bent near a box-shaped camera case. Beyond them stood a man in a long coat, his face swallowed by uneven exposure. "Can you see who they are?" Reed asked from the doorway. "Not yet." Tabitha angled the plate. The case beside the crouching man bore the same crossed line mark her father scratched into his equipment. His shoulder sloped in the familiar way caused by an old wagon fall. She had watched him compensate for it whenever he bent over a focusing screen. "The man by the camera is my father." Mrs. Henshaw rose but did not reach for her. "You are certain?" "I know the case. I know the mark." Tabitha shifted the plate again. A darker band appeared around one pair of wrists, then another. Rope. The three men were not merely kneeling. Their hands had been drawn behind them. Her father's too. Reed stepped closer only after she moved slightly aside, leaving him a clear view that did not crowd her. "The official account said he died during an escape," he asked. "That is what my mother told me the notice claimed. Do you still have the notice? If she kept it, it will be among her papers." "Search because you choose to," Reed said. "Not because I ask." Tabitha lowered the negative. "You want this in your office. I can place it under lock if that is what you decide, and if I do not, then it stays here. Even if it may be evidence, it is your property first. We do not yet know which county, which offense, or whose authority reaches it." His answer promised less than Malcolm's letters had promised. It also took nothing from her. "I keep it." "All right." Reed removed a small notebook. With Tabitha watching, he recorded the crack's location, the maker mark, May's words, the date, the witnesses, and the fact that the plate had not left Tabitha's hands since the backing opened. Mrs. Henshaw signed beneath his entry. Tabitha wrapped the glass in May's original black paper and placed it inside an empty wooden plate holder from her trunk. She closed the brass latch and slipped the key into the pocket beneath her waistband. "I can make a contact print," she said. "A rough one first, enough to see what the negative holds." "What do you need?" Reed asked. "Fresh paper, clean water, chemicals that have not spoiled, and no one on my stairs after dark unless I invite them." "Do you want someone's watching the street?" "Across from the building, not at my door, done." Mrs. Henshaw went below to start coffee. Tabitha carried the locked holder into the inner room, placed it beneath folded cloths in her trunk, and turned the trunk key herself. When she returned, Reed had stepped onto the landing. The third stair from the bottom had split wider during the night. Tabitha began down with one hand on the rail. The board shifted beneath her boot. Reed extended his hand, palm open. "The next one is sound." She could have crossed without him. That was why the choice felt clean. Tabitha placed her hand in his. His grip steadied without tightening. The instant both her feet reached firm wood, he released her. No lingering pressure. No claim hidden inside assistance. She looked back toward the locked room above. Behind that door rested her father's last image and her mother's warning. Malcolm knew enough to fear the mirror, but not enough to know the backing had been opened. That advantage would not survive long. "Tomorrow," Tabitha said, "I make the first print." Reed glanced toward the north windows. "Then tonight we make certain the plate is still there when morning comes." Morning brought no thief to the portrait rooms. It brought something harder to fight: empty stairs. By August 31, Tabitha had scrubbed dust from the north windows, patched the blackout curtain with cloth cut from a ruined mountain backdrop, and repaired the work table well enough to hold trays without rocking. Mrs. Henshaw found her a bucket that did not leak. Reed kept a watcher across the street after dark, never at Tabitha's door, and the original negative remained wrapped in May's black paper inside the locked wooden holder beneath folded cloths in her trunk. On the front window, Tabitha painted 3 plain words: "Portraits taken. Fair price." The first woman who stopped to read them held a boy by the hand. He wore clean suspenders and had hair still damp from a morning wash. The woman placed one foot on the bottom stair. Then a man near the feed store said, "That's the courthouse bride." She hesitated. Another voice added, "The one who shot Wren's foreman." The woman drew the boy back toward the boardwalk. "Come along." Tabitha watched them cross the street. The child looked over his shoulder until his mother turned his face forward. No one climbed the stairs before noon. A cattle buyer paused long enough to ask whether customers were expected to surrender their weapons before sitting. When Tabitha said only if they intended to draw them, he laughed and walked away. Public scorn was not merely unpleasant. It had a price in paper, coal, chemicals, and Monday rent. Near 1 o'clock, an older man climbed the stairs with his hat held in both hands. A pale scar ran from the corner of his mouth toward his left ear, pulling one side of his face into permanent severity. Tabitha recognized him as a teamster who had stood near the courthouse without joining Malcolm's accusations. "Amos Bell," he said. "I haul freight when roads and horses permit." "Tabitha Morrow." "I know." His eyes moved over the cleaned windows, the patched curtain, and the posing chair. "You make a likeness without making a man look foolish. That depends on the man." The unscarred side of his mouth lifted. "Fair answer." He touched 2 fingers to his cheek. "Can you hide this?" "Yes." His expression closed before she continued. "I will not." Amos picked up his hat as though the sitting had ended before it began. "Then you have saved us both some trouble. You asked whether I could hide it, not whether I should." He stopped. Tabitha gestured toward the north window. "If I turn your face away from the light and soften the plate, the scar nearly disappears. So does the shape of your mouth, the set of your eyes, and half the life you have already paid for. You think folks want to see the life? I think they should see you before they see what happened to you." Amos studied her with the guarded patience of a man accustomed to bad bargains. "How would you manage that?" "You stand rather than sit, one hand on the chair. Turn toward the window enough for the light to reach both eyes. The scar remains, but it does not lead the picture." "How much?" 50 cents for the sitting. 50 more if you approve the mounted print." He searched one pocket and produced a quarter. "That is what I have until the freight office pays Friday. Then 25 cents now. The rest when you collect the print." "Credit." He considered the distinction, then set the coin on the table. "Better." Tabitha positioned him beside the chair. Sitting made him fold inward, as if apologizing for the space his shoulders occupied. Standing brought back the teamster in him. She adjusted the reflector and asked him to turn his chin slightly. He arranged his face into a stiff solemnity. "Do not prepare for your funeral," she said. "Think of a road you were glad to finish. Most roads improve only after a man leaves them. Then think of the best horse that carried you over one." His eyes changed. The scar remained, but the man appeared around it. Tabitha removed the lens cap. Amos held steady through the exposure. When she replaced the cap, he exhaled and picked up his hat. "If the rest of me shows," he said, "I'll pay what I owe. It will." At the doorway, he glanced toward the street. "People say you fired before the sheriff arrived. They are right. They leave out that Rusk drew first. That makes a less useful story for Malcolm." Amos nodded. "Truth often earns less than gossip. Not in this room." He descended the stairs, leaving the quarter on the table. Tabitha closed her fingers around the first money she had earned in Montana territory. It did not pay Monday's rent. It proved the stairs were climbable. By September 2, 2 more customers had come, both after Amos showed his receipt at the freight yard and said the photographer had not erased his face. Reed arrived late that afternoon with road dust on his boots and a silver dollar in his hand. He stopped inside the doorway rather than walking toward the inner room. "Amos says you made him look like a railroad director." Amos has never seen a railroad director. He says that improves the comparison. Reed placed the dollar on the table. "I need a portrait." Tabitha did not pick up the coin. "For your office?" "For a horse buyer in Wyoming territory. He wants a likeness of the man handling the gelding before he sends earnest money." "Does your face prove the horse is sound?" "No, but the buyer believes it proves whether I know that." A dangerous faith in photography. "He pays on time." She accepted the dollar. Hat and gun belt on the peg. "Stand before the plain cloth." Reed obeyed without making ceremony of removing the badge-bearing coat and holstered revolver. He stood where she placed him, shoulders too square to the camera, jaw set as if preparing to refuse a mob. Tabitha ducked beneath the focusing cloth. On the ground glass, his image appeared upside down. One side of his face held too much light. The other disappeared. "Turn toward the window." He turned too far. "Back," he corrected. "Hold." The angle remained wrong by less than an inch. Tabitha came around the camera. "May I?" Reed understood before she raised her hand. "Yes." She placed 2 fingertips beneath his jaw and guided his face toward the north light. His skin was warm from the road. He did not lean into the touch, make a joke, or turn the permission into more than she had offered. He waited until she withdrew. Tabitha returned behind the camera. "Do not look severe. I am a sheriff. That is an office. What should I think about? A horse that finally stops fighting the bit. Because it trusts the hand. Because the hand stopped fighting first. A trace of warmth reached his mouth. Tabitha made the exposure before he could hide it. When the sitting ended, Reed buckled on his gun belt and glanced toward the blackout curtain. "Are you making the first print today? A trial print. It will tell me what the negative can reveal. It will not be treated as a formal copy. Do you want me here? At the outer door. No farther." Tabitha darkened the workroom and removed the original from the locked holder with dry hands. The plate went from May's black paper to the contact frame, from the frame to her hands, and nowhere else. Under the dim red lamp, the image surfaced in the tray by degrees. Her father's camera case appeared first, then 3 lowered bodies. Rope darkened around one pair of wrists, then another. Beyond them stood the long-coated figure. A 5-pointed star caught pale light on his vest. 1 point was missing. The face above it remained shadowed. Tabitha lifted the paper before deeper development could swallow detail. She washed the trial print and carried it into the outer room. Reed stayed at the doorway. "A lawman," he said, "or a man wearing a lawman's star. Can you identify him?" "No." "Neither can I," Boots sounded on the stairs. Malcolm entered without knocking, halted when he saw Reed, and fixed his gaze on the wet print. Tabitha covered it with a clean sheet. "Leave." Malcolm took 2 $20 gold pieces and a $10 note from his coat. $50 for the mirror, the glass behind it, and every paper made from that glass. "You claimed not to know what I carried. I know old images create trouble." "Then $50 is a high price for trouble. It is more than this room will earn you in months. Take it downstairs." His attention shifted toward the inner workroom. "Your mother filled your head with suspicion. My mother hid a plate you crossed 2 states to find." Malcolm's control thin. "You cannot read history from stains on glass. Yet you are trying to buy them." Reed stepped aside from the doorway, leaving Malcolm an unobstructed path out. "Miss Morrow asked you to leave." Malcolm swept the money back into his pocket. "This town will tire of indulging you." "The town has not begun," Tabitha said. He descended. At the bottom of the stairs, Deputy Arlen Goss waited with one boot on the first step. "Sheriff," he called, "you moving that plate into the office now." Reed's gaze settled on him. "Custody belongs to Miss Morrow. Seems safer under county lock." "Safer for whom?" Goss gave a brief laugh and followed Malcolm toward the livery. Later, after the trial print had dried, Tabitha crossed the street carrying no evidence, only the image fixed in her memory. Through the dusty office window of Wren livery hung a framed photograph of Malcolm as a younger man beside 3 saddled horses. A deputy's star shone on his vest. Even through the glass, Tabitha could see that 1 point had been broken away. The broken point on Malcolm Wren's old badge matched the star in the trial print. But Tabitha did not cross the street and accuse him. A resemblance could place a man inside a question. It could not yet place him beside her father. On the morning of September 4, she locked the studio door, drew May's trunk into the north light, and began searching for the official notice that had called bound men fugitives. Mrs. Henshaw sat beside the work table as witness. Reed remained near the outer door, and Edwin Pike, editor of the Miles City paper, stood where he could see the trunk without touching it. Tabitha removed folded dresses, studio receipts, a tin of buttons, and a shallow wooden tray fitted beneath the lid. One corner of the lining had lifted where the glue had dried. Beneath it lay a packet tied with black thread. Dust sealed the edges to the wood. Mrs. Henshaw leaned nearer. "That has not been opened lately." "No," Tabitha said. She placed the packet on the table before cutting the thread. The first paper bore a county seal blurred by age. It was dated September 1874 and addressed to Mrs. Morrow. The notice stated that 3 prisoners and 1 photographer had been killed near North Platte in Lincoln County, Nebraska, during an alleged escape from county custody. Personal effects would be returned by freight. Tabitha read the sentence again. "My father was not a prisoner." Reed kept his hands at his sides. "The notice does not call him one. It says he died during the same escape, with his hands tied. The plate shows that. The notice does not. He did not use grief to force the records into agreement. That discipline gave her room to think." The second sheet was an inventory of Charles Morrow's returned effects: clothing, drawing pencils, brass lens cap, camera case, personal tools, one wrapped exposed dry glass plate, not yet developed, a silver-backed hand mirror packed beside the plate. At the bottom, beneath the county clerk's mark, a release line carried a signature in brown ink. M. Wren, deputy. Pike bent closer. That puts a Wren in the chain. It puts a deputy named M. Wren there, Reed said. The telegram can establish whether it was Malcolm. Tabitha continued to the third paper. May had written it herself. She stated that the dry plate returned with her husband's effects had carried an exposure. She had developed it using the gelatin process she and Charles had practiced in their studio. The image showed 3 prisoners and Charles Morrow with their wrists bound behind them. May asked Lincoln County to reopen the inquiry into the deaths. Across the bottom, a clerk had written, "Returned. Insufficient corroboration. No further action." Tabitha rested both palms on the table. May had not accepted silence. She had prepared the plate, written the facts, and sent them back to the same office whose badge appeared in the image. The office had returned her truth as though it were an improperly completed form. "This explains Malcolm's questions," Pike said. "Not all of them," Tabitha replied. "Enough." She went to the small writing box and removed 6 of Malcolm's 37 letters. In one, he asked whether May's mirror had come home with Charles's camera case. In another, he asked whether the backing had ever been repaired. A third asked whether Tabitha intended to bring all old family effects west. Reed read each letter only after she handed it to him. "The inventory linked the mirror and plate," he said. May's petition told the office the plate had been developed. If Malcolm read the petition, Tabitha said, or heard of it, then he knew what he was asking about. Pike tapped one finger near the stack without touching it. The courtship was an inventory. The phrase reached deeper than Malcolm's public insults. Tabitha had once believed he remembered details because they mattered to him. Her mother's mirror, her father's camera case, the state of the backing. He had remembered objects because objects could be recovered. "Not proven as motive yet," she said, "but no longer innocent." Reed took a blank telegraph form from his coat and laid it where all 3 could read. "I will ask only what these papers support," he wrote. "Did Malcolm Wren serve as deputy in Lincoln County in September 1874? Does the office retain record of 3 prisoners and photographer killed near North Platte during alleged escape? Is M. Wren shown on effects inventory for Charles Morrow? Was petition from Morrow regarding a developed dry plate received? Reply by wire. Full records to follow by post." He copied the wording onto a second sheet and gave it to Tabitha. "No hidden question," she said. "No hidden answer," Reed replied. That afternoon, the original negative left its locked wooden holder only under witness. Tabitha made 2 formal contact prints from it. The rough image created before remained only a trial print. These new copies would carry dates, signatures, and a visible chain. Under the dim red lamp, the bound figures emerged again. Charles's camera case appeared near his knee. The star on the standing man caught pale light, 1 point missing. His face remained too dark for a sworn identification. Tabitha marked the first finished paper in pencil. "Print A, September 4, 1883. She signed it and retained it in a leather portfolio. On the second, Print B, she wrote the same date and signature. Mrs. Henshaw signed beneath as witness. Pike folded Print B inside heavy paper, sealed the packet with red wax, and wrote across the join that it had been closed in the presence of Tabitha Morrow and Clara Henshaw. "It goes into my newspaper safe," he said. "No sheriff's cabinet, no livery office. And it remains sealed until witnesses agree to open it," Tabitha said. Agreed. The original returned to May's black paper, then to the wooden holder, then beneath folded cloths in the locked trunk. Reed watched every transfer and touched none of it. At dusk, he carried the telegram to the depot, while Pike took Print B to his office. Tabitha remained to rinse trays and place Print A beneath a clean sheet. The outer stair groaned. Before she reached the door, wood struck wood. The chain snapped from its plate. A shadow crossed the front room and moved toward the inner work area. Tabitha drew the walnut-gripped revolver but held her fire. The intruder stayed behind walls and furniture, never giving her a clear line. Drawers opened. A cabinet fell. Metal scraped against the trunk lock. By the time she reached the workroom, the rear service door stood open to the alley. The money cup had not been touched. Reed's portrait fee remained in the drawer. Camera fittings and chemicals lay where she left them. The intruder had wanted one thing. New scratches marked the trunk lock. Tabitha opened it herself. Folded cloths had been disturbed, but the wooden holder remained beneath them. She carried it to the table, opened the brass latch, and inspected the glass under lamplight. The crack had not spread. Charles's maker mark remained. Reed arrived with Pike less than 10 minutes later. He examined the forced doors, the broken chain, and the drag mark where someone had braced against the trunk. One man came inside, he said. Another may have watched the alley. They knew where to search. Yes. Malcolm saw the inner room. Goss asked about custody. Reed's face tightened at the deputy's name. Yes. Do you want the plate moved, he asked. No. Do you want the street watch continued? Across the road. No one on the stairs. Done. He started toward the door, then stopped. There is something you should know before the wire answers. Tabitha waited. Years ago, I suspected a deputy meant to beat a prisoner before bringing him in. I had no witness and no proof. I told myself caution required waiting. The prisoner escaped across a river before they caught him. That was the only reason he survived without being crippled. Reed's voice remained level. The deputy lost his office later for another matter. My delay did not become wisdom because someone else saved the man. Tabitha studied him. He had placed his own failure on the table without asking her to soften it. She reached across the space and touched 2 fingers to his wrist. The contact lasted only long enough to register as chosen. Reed did not close his hand over hers. Then do not let caution arrive after the harm, she said. I will try not to. Before sunrise on September 7, the telegraph key began sounding at the depot. Reed brought the reply unopened to the studio. Mrs. Henshaw and Pike stood beside the work table while Tabitha broke the seal herself. The first line read, Malcolm Wren served as deputy during the North Platte escape deaths. The second line of the telegram made Malcolm's courtship harder to mistake for chance. Lincoln County still held an effects record bearing the initials M. Wren, and its correspondence book showed that Morrow's petition had entered the deputy office before being returned without action. Tabitha read the wire at her work table on September 8 while Mrs. Henshaw stood near the stairs, and Edwin Pike kept his hands away from the paper until she offered it. Reed remained across from her, hat tucked beneath one arm. Then Malcolm knew my mother developed the plate, Tabitha said. He could have known, Reed replied. The record proves the petition reached the office. It does not say who read it. His initials released my father's effects. Yes. His letters asked about the mirror. Yes. And the backing. Yes. Reed's refusal to push beyond the record no longer felt like resistance. Each fact stayed where it could bear weight. Pike read the telegram. The county still calls the deaths an escape. Tabitha placed May's petition beside the official notice. The plate still shows bound wrists. Then one account is false, Reed said, or incomplete enough to hide what followed. Boots sounded on the outer stairs. Arlen Goss entered without knocking, his deputy's badge catching the north light. His gaze went first to the telegram. Nebraska confirmed Wren wore a star. Reed's attention settled on him. Who told you the answer came? Goss shrugged. Telegraph clerk mentioned traffic from Lincoln County. He named the subject. Small town. Men talk. What else did he tell you? Nothing worth remembering. Goss nodded toward Tabitha's trunk. You moving the glass into the office now? No. After somebody forced her door. Miss Morrow keeps custody. Seems risky. For whom? Reed asked. Goss smiled without warmth. For everybody tied to it. Tabitha folded the telegram. I am not tied to it. I own it. His eyes held hers a second too long. Glass breaks under either word. Reed stepped away from the table. You have rounds at the stock pens. I was headed there. Then continue. Goss left, but his boots descended more slowly than a man in a hurry. Reed waited until the street door closed. Pike, walk Mrs. Henshaw downstairs. When they were gone, Tabitha said, he knew the wire concerned Malcolm before anyone told him. Yes. Do you trust him? Reed's expression revealed little. I trust what I can prove. The answer carried the same caution he had confessed once, nearly cost a prisoner his body. Tabitha heard that history inside it. Do not let caution arrive after the harm. I remember. Reed went to the depot alone. The telegraph clerk admitted Goss had visited before sunrise and asked who sent the Lincoln County message, whether the reply had arrived, and whether the old photograph would be stored in the sheriff's office. The clerk had answered the first two questions and claimed ignorance on the third. Reed returned to his office without confronting Goss. Instead, he placed an empty dispatch box inside the locked cabinet behind his desk. Near noon, while Goss copied stock theft notices at a side table, Reed told a constable that sensitive papers might be moved into the box before nightfall. Goss did not raise his head. His pen stopped once against the page. Reed noticed. He also remembered how easily suspicion could become an excuse to wait. He still did not warn Tabitha. 2 days later, a dry wind drove dust east along the road to Buffalo Coulee. Tabitha sat beside Reed on the buckboard with her camera case braced between her boots. Print A remained secured in its leather portfolio at the studio. Print B stayed sealed in Pike's safe. The original negative remained wrapped in maize black paper, inside the locked wooden holder, beneath folded cloths in her trunk. Reed had hired her to photograph 2 bay geldings for a buyer in Wyoming Territory who wanted proof of shoulder depth, leg alignment, and handling before sending earnest money. 9 miles beyond Miles City, Buffalo Coulee Remount appeared without grandeur. A weathered barn, 3 corrals, a low house, a wind pump, and leased pasture stretching toward broken ground. Malcolm wrote that you owned half the horses between town and the Yellowstone, Tabitha said. Reed guided the team around a washout. Malcolm counts another man's property generously. How many are yours? 12. I trained 6 more for other men. And the land leased. That sounds less impressive in a marriage letter. It sounds more expensive in winter. At the corrals, Reed brought out a broad-chested bay with 1 white heel. Tabitha rejected the shade beside the barn and directed him toward the south fence. Turn his head toward the open ground. Reed changed sides. The gelding tossed once and tightened the lead. Reed did not jerk the bit or force the animal's neck. He waited, gave a low command, and asked again. The horse settled. Tabitha watched the method before she studied the stance. Hold him there. She placed the camera on its tripod and went beneath the focusing cloth. The ground glass showed the bay upside down, Reed's hand near the cheekpiece, and a strip of pale sky. Half a foot left. Reed stepped the wrong direction. Your other left. Sheriffing has damaged me. Stand still before it spreads. He came nearer to see what she meant. Tabitha lifted one edge of the dark cloth so he could look beside her. The enclosed space narrowed around their shoulders. Heat from the road lingered in his coat. His face was close enough that she felt the pause in his breathing before she heard it. No crowd, no badge between them. No reason for the awareness, except that both of them knew it was there. Reed did not lean nearer. Tabitha did not retreat. The gelding stamped, pulling the lead rope through Reed's hand. He stepped back into daylight at once and steadied the animal. The dark cloth settled against Tabitha's cheek. The horse saved your reputation, she said. I was considering yours. Mine survived the courthouse. Then it may be stronger than mine. She exposed 2 plates, one broadside and one with Reed handling the gelding. By the time the camera was packed, Amos Bell arrived with a wagon load of feed sacks and a repaired harness draped over the seat. He greeted Tabitha with the less scarred side of his smile. My portrait made me look respectable. Paying the balance helped. Same thing in a freight yard. Reed asked whether Amos had hauled through Lincoln County in 1874. The teamster rubbed his thumb along the brim of his hat. North Platte Road, twice that fall. Tabitha removed no evidence from the studio. Instead, she described only the standing figure and damaged badge, then asked whether Amos would examine Print A later under witness. Amos agreed and came to Morrow portrait rooms before sundown. Tabitha uncovered the print on the work table. Tell me only what you recognize, she said. Not what you think I want. Amos bent over the image. His eyes moved from the bound men to the star. I saw that deputy near the county barn outside North Platte. 1 point missing from his badge. When? Reed asked. Fall of 74. Near the time folks said prisoners were killed trying to run. Amos studied the shadowed face. He supervised a wagon carrying a dead photographer's effects, camera box tied in back, a silver mirror wrapped in a blanket on top. Tabitha's fingers tightened against the portfolio edge. Did you see him shoot anyone? No. Did you see the prisoners? No. Then that is where your memory ends. Amos nodded. That is where it ends. Reed asked, would you recognize the deputy now, if age did not remake him? His name is Malcolm Wren. The scar along Amos's cheek pulled tight. Then age did less work than it ought to have. After Amos left, Tabitha laid Malcolm's 6 most revealing letters in a row. One asked whether May's mirror had returned with Charles's camera case. Another asked whether the backing had ever been repaired. The last contained a sentence Tabitha had once read as tenderness. Bring the mirror west, and I will keep the burden of old things from you. She read it aloud. The words no longer offered relief. They offered custody. Malcolm had remembered the mirror, the backing, the camera case, and the freight return. Because those details mattered to the thing he wanted. He had not remembered her. He did not court me because he guessed I carried the plate, Tabitha said. He courted me because my mother told his office she had developed it. That is the strongest reading, Reed replied. And he believed marriage would let him search without calling it theft. Yes. Across the street, Arlen Goss left the boardwalk, glanced once behind him, and entered Wren livery through the side door. Reed saw him. The suspicion he had called unproven now had a direction, a door, and a man walking through it. Tabitha gathered the letters into one stack. Reed said nothing. Reed's silence followed Tabitha into the morning of September 13. She had seen Arlen Goss enter Wren livery through the side door. Reed had seen it too, yet when he left the studio the previous evening, he had spoken only of the dry wind and the watcher across the street. Tabitha did not ask a question merely to give a man the chance to avoid it. First, she needed to know how much truth the glass could bear. The original negative remained wrapped in May's black paper, inside the locked wooden holder, beneath folded cloths in her trunk. Print A rested in its leather portfolio. Print B remained sealed in Edwin Pike's safe. Tabitha drew the blackout curtain halfway, placed a magnifying lens over a wooden support near the north window, and unlocked the trunk while Mrs. Henshaw watched from the outer room. Reed stood by the door, far enough away that his shadow did not cross the work table. Tabitha removed the holder, opened the brass latch, and lifted the plate by its edges. The crack in the upper corner had not moved. She set the negative beneath the lens and adjusted its angle by fractions. Charles Morrow's camera case emerged first, pale against the darker ground. His bound wrists lay behind him. 2 other men knelt nearby, their arms drawn back in the same way. The standing figure wore the chipped star, but his face remained uneven in the glass. Tabitha shifted the plate again. A narrow dark line appeared beside the camera case. It ran from the shutter mechanism, crossed the dirt, and disappeared beneath the outside edge of Charles's boot. Her breath stopped. Reed. He came nearer but did not bend over her shoulder. What is it, a shutter cord? She pointed above the emulsion without touching it. My father used one when he wanted to stand inside his own landscapes. He could open the shutter from several feet away. Reed studied the line. With his hands tied, not with his hands. Tabitha moved the lens until the cord's end sharpened beneath Charles's boot. He had set the camera before someone bound him. He had placed a dry plate, framed the ground, and left himself one final way to make a record. A turn of the foot, a measured pull, one exposure before whatever came next. He knew danger was near, she said. He knew enough to prepare, Reed replied. He did not turn the possibility into certainty. Tabitha returned the lens to the standing man. Under the stronger angle, pieces of the face gathered, a long cheek, a narrow mouth, hair combed away from a high forehead, and a notch beside the left eyebrow. Malcolm still carried that notch beneath age and heavier flesh. The chipped point of the star matched the old photograph hanging in Wren livery. So did the set of the shoulders. Tabitha laid the effects inventory, May's petition, the telegram, and one of Malcolm's letters beside the plate. It is him. Reed examined the image through the lens. It strongly resembles him. You still will not call it identification. I will call it what I can defend. Malcolm Wren served as a deputy. His initials released your father's effects. May's petition reached his office. Amos saw him near the county barn and the effects wagon. His letters asked about the mirror and its backing. The man in this image has his damaged badge, his face and his mark beside the brow. Reed straightened. That places Malcolm there while the men were alive and bound, not after. No, it does not prove he fired. No, or that he tied them. No, Tabitha's anger did not lessen under those limits. It became narrower, more useful. It proves the escape story cannot stand as written. Yes, she covered the plate with black paper before the light could warm it. My mother sent them this truth. They returned it. They returned her petition. They did not erase the plate. They tried, and failed. Tabitha placed the negative back inside the holder and locked the latch. Her hands remained steady until the key turned in the trunk. Then she stood with both palms against the lid, feeling the wood beneath them. What happens if I accuse Malcolm now? Reed answered without pretending the question had one clean outcome. He says the image is false. He says your mother forged the papers. He says Amos remembers what you paid him to remember. He may leave the territory before Nebraska sends full records. And if I wait, he keeps searching for a way to take the original. Then give me every choice, not only the one you prefer. Reed moved to the opposite side of the table, leaving the stairway clear. You can leave Miles City with the plate, the papers, and print A. Pike can send print B wherever you name. I can have witnesses see you onto the train, but I will not choose where you go. He may follow. Yes, second. You can remain and make no public accusation. Pike keeps print B sealed. I continue asking for records without naming you beyond what the inquiry requires. And the third, you pursue it openly. You give the justice a statement. Amos gives only what he witnessed. Pike prints the contradiction between bound men and the escape notice. We ask Lincoln County for the full correspondence book and effects record. Reed held her gaze. Whichever you choose, I do not think less of you. You would prefer one, yes? Which? I want Malcolm unable to destroy the truth. That is not an answer about me. His jaw tightened. I want you to stay. He let the words stand without moving closer. I will not make staying the price of my help. That honesty reached farther than persuasion would have. Tabitha walked to the north window. Wren livery stood across the street, respectable from a distance. Men entered for horses, harness, and news. No sign announced that its owner had written 37 letters to recover a piece of glass. I will pursue it, she said. On my terms. Name them. The original remains with me unless I decide otherwise. Print B stays sealed. No one says the photograph proves who fired. Amos speaks only to his own memory. Pike prints facts, not accusation. Agreed. Tabitha turned from the window. And if you suspect anyone inside your office, I am told before that person comes near this room. Reed's face gave away nothing. Agreed. He already suspected Goss. She did not know how far that suspicion had gone. The promise entered the room carrying a weakness she could not yet see. Tabitha rested one hand on the locked trunk. My mother asked men with badges to examine this. They sent her away. Then we build enough record that refusing to look becomes its own answer. And my father? His image will not disappear again. The words were not a vow of justice. They were narrower. That made them believable. Tabitha crossed the room before caution could turn her choice into another argument. She stopped close enough to see dust caught in the seam of Reed's coat. Her right hand settled against his vest below the badge, not on it. Reed remained still. He did not presume the meaning of her touch. Tabitha rose and kissed him. Briefly at first, deliberately. Only after her mouth met his did one of his hands rest lightly at her waist. His lips answered with warmth held under control. No grasp, no demand. Tabitha ended the kiss first. Reed released her at once. That was not gratitude, she said. I did not take it for gratitude. His voice had roughened. Good. Tabitha. It was the first time he had used her given name without a title. The sound of it lingered after they stepped apart. Later that afternoon, Pike came to copy the documents he could describe without opening print B misses. Henshaw witnessed Tabitha return the original negative, still wrapped in maize black paper, to the wooden holder. Tabitha placed the holder beneath the folded plate cloths in her trunk, turned the key, and slipped it into the pocket beneath her waistband. At the bottom of the stairs, Arlen Goss crouched over a loose spur strap. From the open doorway below, he could see the trunk, the plate holder, and the place where Tabitha put the key. His eyes lifted only once. Reed stood at the north window. He saw Goss learn where the original was kept. He remembered Tabitha's condition. He remembered his promise. Then he chose to wait. Arlen Goss came to the portrait rooms on September 16 wearing Reed Ashby's authority on his chest and a lie in his mouth. Tabitha had just finished mounting a customer's likeness when his boots sounded on the stairs. Print A lay inside its leather portfolio beneath the work table. The original negative remained wrapped in maize black paper inside the locked wooden holder beneath folded cloths in her trunk. Print B was still sealed in Edwin Pike's newspaper safe. Goss entered without waiting to be invited. Sheriff wants the old glass moved to his office. Tabitha did not reach for the trunk. Why? Wren may run. Ashby wants the evidence under county lock before sundown. Reed agreed the original would remain with me. New information changed that. His gaze moved toward the inner room, then back to her. What information? Not for a public room. This room is not public. Goss's jaw tightened. You know what I mean. Reed never called the plate old glass. He called it the original, the negative, or the plate. He gave reasons before asking for custody. He did not send men upstairs with incomplete sentences. Where is his written order? Tabitha asked. There isn't time to trade paper. There is time to write one line. Miss Morrow, I'm carrying out a lawful instruction. Then repeat his exact words. Goss took one step nearer. Bring the old glass into the office before Malcolm reaches it. Reed Ashby did not send you. The deputy stopped. The badge on his vest caught the north light. May's warning returned with painful clarity. Do not let the badge that wrote the report learn this plate survived. Tabitha drew no weapon. Suspicion was not a target and Mrs. Henshaw might be below the floor. Leave. Goss's face lost its practiced patience. You think one trick shot makes you wiser than every lawman in Custer County? No. I think a man with a true order does not fear showing it. He moved around the work table. Tabitha reached the trunk first and put one hand over the keyhole. Goss caught her wrist. She twisted free, drove the heel of her right hand into his forearm, and braced her shoulder against the trunk lid. Take your hand off my property. You should handed it over when asked. I was not asked. He shoved the trunk sideways. Its iron corner scraped across the floorboards. Tabitha reached beneath her coat for the walnut grip. Goss struck her left side with his shoulder before she cleared leather. The shelving behind her hit below the joint. Pain flashed through her collarbone and down her arm. Bottles rattled. One fell and shattered beside the washstand. Her left arm dropped uselessly against her ribs. Goss drew his revolver. The muzzle found her chest. Tabitha stopped her own draw. The table blocked half her line. A missed shot could pass into the floor or the room below. No clean line. Open the trunk, Goss said. You took the key. He had. Keeping the revolver on her, he turned the lock and threw back the lid. Folded plate cloths came out in one fist. The wooden holder appeared beneath them. Goss lifted it. Keep it flat, Tabitha said. The crack will spread if you carry it badly. Worried I'll ruin your story. Worried you will destroy what Malcolm paid you to steal. His eyes narrowed. You know nothing about what he paid. Not a denial. He tucked the holder beneath his arm, found the leather portfolio, and pulled out print A. The rough trial print remained face down beneath a drying board near the inner wall. Goss never saw it. There's another copy, Tabitha said. His attention snapped back to her. She let fear show him only what she wanted him to see. And you found the plate my mother hid. You still don't have the only negative my father made. Goss went still. The bluff had landed. Where is it? Beyond Malcolm's reach. He crossed the room, seized her by the good arm, and forced her toward the narrow storage chamber behind the dark room. Tabitha braced one boot against the threshold. Goss struck the door against her shin until she had to move. Then he shoved her inside. Her bruised shoulder caught the frame. White pain blurred the shelves. The door slammed. An outside hook dropped into place. His boots moved through the studio and down the stairs. Tabitha pressed her ear to the panel and counted until she could no longer hear him. The storage room had no window. Dust, old paper, and chemical corks crowded the shelves. The upper half of the door was solid. The lower half held 3 narrow pine strips nailed over an old pass-through opening misses. Henshaw had mentioned it while explaining why mice preferred the back wall. Tabitha found the weakest strip with her right hand. A broken plate rack rested on the shelf. She gripped it by one end and struck the pine. The first blow jarred her injured shoulder despite using her right arm. The second split the wood. The third opened a gap wide enough for light. She drove the rack through again, widening the break, then kicked loose the lower edge. Splinters caught her skirt. Tabitha knelt, reached through the opening, and felt for the hook. Too high. She dragged a chemical crate beneath the door, climbed onto it, and reached again. Her left arm stayed pinned against her body. Her right fingers found the iron hook and lifted. The door opened. She stepped into the studio alone. Goss had taken the original negative and print A. He had left the trial print, the death notice, the inventory, May's petition, Malcolm's letters, and her revolver. He wanted the source, not merely the story. Tabitha holstered the weapon, called down to Mrs. Henshaw, and sent a boy for Reed. When Reed reached the rooms, he stopped just inside the broken door. His gaze moved from the splintered storage panel to the open trunk, the empty place beneath the folded cloths, and the way Tabitha held her left arm. He took one step toward her, then checked himself. "Where is Goss?" she asked. Reed's face hardened. "He took it." "I know what he took. How long have you suspected him?" The question left no place for shelter. "Since he questioned the telegraph clerk. Before Buffalo Coulee." "Yes. You saw him enter Malcolm's side door." "Yes. You watched him learn where I kept the plate." Reed's answer came lower. "Yes. I told you that if you suspected anyone inside your office, I was to be warned before that person came near this room. You did. You agreed. I did. Then you let him come here wearing a badge I had reason to believe belonged to your word." Reed did not defend the intention. "I put an empty dispatch box in my office to see whether he would search it or pass the location to Malcolm. I thought if he believed the plate stayed here, I could learn who he served. You made my door part of your test." "Yes. Without telling me. Yes." Pain throbbed from Tabitha's shoulder into her neck. "You once told me your caution nearly cost a prisoner his body." "I told you, and then you repeated it with mine." Reed's hand lifted an inch as if to examine the injury. Tabitha stepped back. He lowered it at once. "You need the doctor," he said. "I need you to understand that secrecy was not protection." "I understand." "You understand after the harm." His jaw tightened. "Yes." A bell rang outside near Wren Livery. Voices gathered in the street. Mrs. Henshaw appeared on the stairs. "Malcolm has a crowd." Tabitha descended without taking Reed's arm. Each step jarred her shoulder, but she kept moving. Malcolm stood beside a metal basin placed on a crate. Dale Rusk waited behind him, his right hand no longer bandaged but held stiffly at his side. Malcolm lifted print A between two fingers. "This is the paper Miss Morrow manufactured to defame respectable men." Edwin Pike pushed through the gathering. "That property was stolen." Malcolm touched one corner of the print to a lantern flame. "A fraud cannot be stolen." Fire crawled across the paper. The bound men darkened, curled, and disappeared. Charles's camera case blackened. The chipped star vanished last. Ash fell into the basin. Tabitha stopped at the edge of the crowd. "You burned one copy." Malcolm crushed the final ember with a stick. "There was only one. Then you have nothing to fear from another." His eyes betrayed him before his face recovered. Goss had carried the bluff to him. Malcolm believed there might be a second negative. "Produce it," he said. "I will." Reed stood several paces behind Tabitha, close enough to act and far enough not to claim her side. Malcolm returned to the livery. The crowd broke into murmuring knots, uncertain whether the burning had ended a lie or proved a fear. Reed watched the side door close. He will not destroy the original yet. Tabitha kept her injured arm against her ribs. "Why should I trust what you think?" "You should not trust it because I say it. Look at what he did. He burned the paper where everyone could see. He kept the glass hidden because Goss told him there may be another negative. He needs to compare the maker mark, the crack, and the image before he destroys anything." Tabitha looked at the ash. Print A was gone. Print B remained sealed. The original still existed because greed and uncertainty had become stronger than fear. Reed suspended Goss before sunset and entered complaints for the taking of the plate, the assault and locking Tabitha against her will. Goss did not return to his room. One day passed, then another. On the evening of September 18, the original negative was still unbroken, and Malcolm Wren was waiting for a plate that had never existed. 3 days after Malcolm burned print A, the original negative remained unbroken, and Tabitha knew the lie she had planted was the only reason. On the morning of September 19, Reed came to the studio carrying a folded statement instead of an excuse. Tabitha's left shoulder was still dark with bruising beneath her dress. Raising the arm above her waist sent pain toward her neck, so she kept it close and worked with her right hand. The trial print remained face down beneath a clean board. May's petition, the death notice, the effects inventory, Malcolm's letters, and the telegram were locked in the studio. Print B remained sealed in Edwin Pike's safe. Only the original negative was gone. Reed stopped beside the posing chair, leaving the way to the stairs open. "This is every fact I knew before Goss came through your door," he said. He placed the folded paper on the work table. "When I learned it, what I did, what I failed to tell you." Tabitha opened it. The chronology began with Goss's questions at the telegraph office. It included the empty dispatch box, the visit to Wren Livery, and the moment Goss watched where she put the key. Reed had written his own failure as plainly as he wrote any witness statement. No softer wording, no claim that he meant well. "Did the justice read this?" she asked. "Yesterday. Before you brought it to me." "Yes." "What did he say?" "That a sheriff who conceals danger from the person most exposed to it weakens his own claim to have protected anyone." "He is right." "Yes." Tabitha placed the paper flat. "Did you believe Goss might come here?" "I believed he might pass." "The location to Malcolm." "Did you believe someone might try to take the plate?" "Yes." "And you kept that from me to preserve your test?" "Yes." Her shoulder throbbed. She let the pain sharpen the next question. "Why should I believe your conduct will change now?" Reed did not answer with regret. He reached into his coat and set down 3 more papers. At dawn, Goss's horse was found in Malcolm's rear stall. "I learned that before coming here." He placed the first note beside the chronology. Rusk carried food into the private tack room twice. Amos Bell saw him the second time. A second note. Malcolm sent a boy to ask Pike whether another image had been printed. Pike told him nothing. A third note. "I have not entered the livery. I have not sent word in your name. I have not moved your papers. I came here before acting on any of it." Tabitha read each line. "And if danger is already moving, I stop the immediate harm. Nothing more. If there is time, you are told first. If you think my choice is foolish, I say so. Then I listen. You said something similar before." "I know." Reed kept his hands at his sides. "So I am not asking you to trust the promise. I am showing you what I did with it this morning." That was harder to dismiss. Not enough to erase the locked room. Enough to begin measuring. Tabitha folded the reports together. "There is no second negative." Reed's eyes narrowed slightly. "You told Goss there was." "I told him he did not have the only negative my father made." "A lie, a weapon, yes. No rebuke, no moral instruction offered after danger had passed." "I needed Malcolm uncertain," she said. "If Goss believed another plate existed, he would carry that fear straight to him." "He did." "Then Malcolm is holding the original because he wants to know whether it is the only source." "That is the strongest reason." Tabitha crossed to the cabinet where the abandoned studio's damaged plates had been stacked. Most were fogged, cracked, or never exposed. She selected one with a corner fracture different from the originals and set it on the work table. "Then we give him a second source to find." Reed studied the worthless glass. "What are you proposing?" "A decoy. Not a print. A plate." "Where?" "The abandoned photographer's wagon near the old fairground. Mrs. Henshaw says a traveling picture man left it there 2 winters ago. Wren stores broken harness in it. Better. He knows the place." "Why would Charles Morrow's plate be there?" "It would not, but a story can place it there." Reed waited. He did not take over the design. Tabitha found a fine needle and scratched a poor imitation of her father's maker mark near the lower edge. A former wagon hand claims he found a second Morrow plate under the camera shelf. The first plate went home through county hands. The second was hidden before the effects wagon left. Malcolm knows only one was listed on the inventory, which is why he will believe an unlisted plate was concealed. He may send Goss alone, not if the message says the second plate shows his face more clearly. Reed's attention sharpened. He will want to compare the marks himself, and he will bring the original, unless he destroys it first. He has waited 3 days already. Certainty matters to him more than speed. Reed looked toward the cracked glass. "What do you need from me? Reports, not decisions. All right." By noon, Edwin Pike had copied the false note in hurried pencil onto the back of a freight notice. It said a former wagon hand had found a second Morrow plate beneath the shelf of the abandoned photographer's wagon and believed the standing deputy's face showed clearly. Pike left the page half-covered on his counter while a livery errand boy known to trade gossip for nickels waited for a receipt. The boy read enough. Reed followed at a distance and returned to the studio before entering the livery district. "He went through Wren's side door," he said. "Did he see you?" "No." "Did you enter?" "No." Reed placed the report on the table. Change conduct. Again. Over the next 2 days, every movement came to Tabitha before action followed. Rusk bought lamp oil. Goss's saddle remained in Malcolm's rear room. A stable boy heard 2 men arguing about which glass was real. Amos rode to the fairground under the excuse of inspecting a damaged wagon tongue. He returned with dust on his coat. "Fresh hoof marks behind the cottonwoods," he said. 2 horses, maybe 3. Somebody opened the wagon since yesterday. Tabitha finished the decoy and wrapped it in black paper newer than maize, but rubbed with dust to dull the difference. She never tried to make it perfect. Malcolm needed to discover the flaw only after placing the original beside it. On September 22, Tabitha, Reed, Pike, Amos, and a county constable inspected the wagon separately. Its warped boards enclosed an old camera stand, a stained work table, and shutters with narrow sight lines toward the cottonwoods. Tabitha chose the position behind the camera stand. Her right hand could reach the walnut grip. Her injured left arm could remain protected. Pike would wait beyond the west shutter. Amos would cover the road. The constable would stand among the cottonwoods with a clear view of the door. Reed would remain behind a broken fare booth south of the wagon. 2 knocks mean the original is on the table, Tabitha said. 1 hard knock means the position has failed. "And if Goss draws before you can signal," Reed asked. "You act only if your line is clear. Malcolm may block it, then you hold." Reed's jaw tightened. "That may cost us time. Taking my choice cost more." He met her gaze. "Then I hold." No argument, no insistence that his badge gave him final say. They returned to the studio before dusk. Mrs. Henshaw bound Tabitha's shoulder beneath her dress and left them with a lantern, rope, a clean cloth, and no conversation. Reed stood several feet away with his hands empty. "May I ask for something that is not part of the plan?" Tabitha waited. "May I hold you?" The question did not erase what he had done. It showed he understood that prior closeness had not survived the locked room intact. Tabitha crossed the distance herself. She placed her right hand against his chest and stepped into his arms. Reed held her with one hand at the center of her back and the other low at her waist, avoiding the bruised shoulder. He did not tighten his grip until she settled nearer. "This is not trust restored," she said. "I know, it is trust being rebuilt." "I know that too." She remained there long enough to hear his breathing steady, then stepped away first. Reed released her at once. After midnight on September 23, Tabitha waited behind the camera stand inside the abandoned wagon. The decoy rested on the work table beneath black paper. Outside, Pike, Amos, and the constable held their positions. Reed stayed where she had placed him. Hoofbeats approached from the south road. 2 riders stopped beyond the cottonwoods. Leather creaked. Boots touched earth. Malcolm Wren came toward the wagon carrying a lantern. Arlen Goss followed with the padded wooden plate holder beneath his arm. Malcolm Wren set the lantern on the abandoned wagon's work table and told Arlen Goss to put down the plate holder. Tabitha waited behind the old camera stand with her right hand near the walnut grip beneath her coat. Her injured left arm rested against her ribs, held there by the binding Mrs. Henshaw had wrapped before dusk. Beyond the warped boards, Edwin Pike covered the west shutter, Amos Bell watched the road, and the county constable waited among the cottonwoods. Reed remained south of the wagon behind the broken fare booth where Tabitha had placed him. No one moved. Goss lowered the padded wooden holder onto the table. The brass latch gave a small click beneath his thumb. Original on the table. Tabitha rapped twice against the camera stand. Malcolm's head lifted. "Rats," Goss said. "Too measured." Malcolm turned the lantern wick lower. "Then keep your hand near your gun and open the case." Goss did. May's black paper appeared inside. Tabitha could see the fold her mother had made nearly 9 years earlier. The thin upper corner of the plate showed through where the paper had worn pale. Malcolm took the glass by its edges. "Hold the light higher," Goss obeyed. Malcolm examined the crack, the edge wear, and Charles Morrow's scratched mark near the lower border. His face lost the last trace of civic calm. "This is the one she found behind the mirror. I told you it was." "You told me she claimed another existed." "She did. That is not the same as knowing." Goss glanced toward the wagon walls. "You paid me to learn where the first one was. I learned. I paid you to keep control of a woman and a room. You failed at both. I got the glass. After she saw your face, heard your voice, and told half the town you took it." Malcolm laid the original on a folded cloth and reached for the black-wrapped decoy beneath the camera shelf. "If this second plate is genuine, we destroy both. If it is not, we destroy the first and leave the counterfeit where the sheriff can find it." "And when Ashby asks who entered her rooms?" "You were the deputy. You acted beyond instruction." Goss stared at him. "You said you would swear the order came from you." "I said no such thing. You told me to use the badge." "Your badge." Malcolm began unwrapping the decoy. "Your judgment. Your money." Malcolm paused. "Lower your voice. You paid me after I questioned the telegraph clerk. You paid me again after I found where she kept the holder, and you accepted. Because you said the plate would hang us both if Nebraska opened the old file." Malcolm leaned closer to the lantern. "It can place me near a county barn. Nothing more. Bound men near your star is more than nothing. Only if the plate survives." He exposed the decoy. Its crack crossed the wrong corner. The copied maker mark was close enough to invite inspection and poor enough to fail it. Malcolm brought the original beside it. He compared the scratches, then rubbed one thumbnail over the decoy's lower edge. "Fresh," Goss swore. Malcolm held the second plate toward the flame. "She made this. Then where is the other one?" "There is no other one." Tabitha stepped from behind the camera stand. Malcolm froze with the decoy in one hand. Goss turned so sharply the lantern light jumped across the walls. "Put both plates on the table," Tabitha said. "You came alone?" Malcolm asked. "No." His eyes moved toward the shutters. "How many?" "Enough." Goss reached for his revolver. "Don't," Tabitha said. He drew anyway. The wagon's narrow interior forced his gun arm outward as he cleared leather. Malcolm shifted between Tabitha and the south wall, either by instinct or design. Through the gap beside his shoulder, Tabitha saw Reed's revolver rise beyond the broken booth. His line passed too near Malcolm and the original glass. Goss's muzzle came toward her chest. Tabitha had a cleaner angle. His outer forearm lay clear beyond Malcolm's coat. "Mine is clear." Reed lowered his muzzle. Trust came down with it. Tabitha drew and fired once. The bullet struck the fleshy outside of Goss's gun arm. His hand opened from the shock. The revolver hit the floorboards and slid beneath the work table. He staggered into the wagon wall, clutching his forearm. No second shot followed. Malcolm seized the original holder with his free hand and reached toward the lantern flame. Reed came through the south opening, before Malcolm crossed half the distance. He caught Malcolm's wrist, drove it away from the light, and turned him against the table without striking his face. Malcolm fought for leverage. Reed used the arm, the wall, and the man's own momentum. The holder slipped. Tabitha caught it against her body. Pain tore through her left shoulder when the weight struck, but she kept the case level and pinned it with her right forearm. Reed forced Malcolm's hand behind him and looped rope around both wrists. "You cannot arrest me on a woman's trick," Malcolm said. "I can arrest you for trying to destroy stolen property in front of witnesses," Reed replied, "and for acting with a suspended deputy who drew on her." Goss backed toward the door. The constable entered from the cottonwoods, with his weapon trained low but ready. Pike appeared at the west shutter. Amos came through the main door carrying no gun, only the lantern he had taken from the road post. "I heard enough," Pike said. Goss's eyes darted from the constable to Malcolm. "He paid me." Malcolm turned his head. "Say nothing." "You were going to leave it on me." "Goss, you told me to take the plate. You said marriage would get you the mirror without theft. But she refused you. You said the inventory proved the glass came back beside it." His words came in broken bursts, driven by anger rather than confession. "You said she had another plate. You said I could burn this one after you checked the marks. Shut your mouth. You paid me. You took the money. Because you said the old deaths would ruin us both." Reed did not question him further inside the wagon. "Save the rest for a signed statement before the justice." Goss laughed once, breathless and bitter. "Justice, Wren will buy another story before dawn." "Not tonight," the constable said. He recovered the fallen revolver and bound Goss's uninjured hand to his belt before wrapping the wounded arm with the clean cloth Mrs. Henshaw had supplied. Amos placed the lantern farther from the plates. Pike wrote the first lines of a witness note against the wagon wall. Tabitha set the holder on the table, opened it herself, and unfolded May's black paper. The original lay inside. The upper corner crack had not widened. Charles's maker mark remained. No heat had touched the emulsion. She examined both edges and the center before replacing the paper. "This is the original taken from my trunk," she said. "The other glass is mine as well, but it is a worthless plate I altered as bait. There has never been a second original negative." Pike wrote the sentence. Amos repeated it back. The constable added his name beneath the note. Malcolm watched the holder rather than Tabitha. "You think one photograph makes your father innocent. The photograph shows he was bound. It does not show what happened after. I know." Her refusal to overclaim struck harder than accusation. Malcolm had built his safety on the hope that grief would make her careless with truth. She denied him that refuge. Reed finished tying Malcolm and stood. "Malcolm Wren, you are under arrest for acting with Goss in the taking of Miss Morrow's plate, attempting to destroy it, and the conduct witnessed here tonight. The justice will determine what charges are supported. Nebraska will determine what belongs to Nebraska." "You have no proof I killed anyone." "I did not say we did." Reed's voice remained flat. "That question stays open." The constable took charge of the decoy as an exhibit. Pike wrapped it separately and marked the time. Tabitha kept the original holder in her right hand. No one asked her to surrender it in the dark. Outside, the first edge of dawn had begun to thin the eastern sky. The road back to Miles City lay rough beneath the wagon wheels, and Tabitha's shoulder had stiffened until each breath pulled against the bruise. Reed stopped at the threshold. "Do you want help stepping down?" Not an assumption. A question. Tabitha shifted the holder against her body and offered him her right hand. He took only what she gave, steadying her from the wagon to the ground. Once both boots held firm earth, he released her. Malcolm and Goss were led toward town under the constable's watch. Amos rode behind them. Pike carried his notes and the decoy. Reed stayed beside Tabitha without reaching for the recovered glass. The original had survived deceit, theft, fire, and a drawn gun. Survival was no longer enough. By full daylight, it would have to produce the same truth under the hands of someone who had never met Charles Morrow, never trusted Tabitha, and owed Reed Ashby nothing. By sunrise on September 24, the original negative had survived long enough to become a legal problem instead of a private danger. That difference mattered. Tabitha carried the padded wooden holder into the justice's room herself, her left arm bound close beneath her dress and her right hand firm around the handle. The thin crack in the plate's upper corner had not spread. May's black paper remained around the glass. Edwin Pike brought his notes from the abandoned wagon. Amos Bell gave his statement in plain language and refused every invitation to improve it. The county constable described the two plates on the table: Goss's drawn revolver, Tabitha's warning, the single shot, Malcolm's reach toward the lantern, and the words he had heard before entering. Reed waited outside until the others had finished. The justice had not been at the wagon and had heard none of the conversation firsthand. He read each statement separately, asked where every person had stood, and marked the places where one account agreed with another. Malcolm demanded release and called the entire affair a trap arranged by a woman seeking revenge. Goss, his wounded arm wrapped by the doctor, said little after learning Malcolm had already described him as a deputy acting beyond instruction. "You can accuse each other after counsel arrives," the justice said. "Until then, I am deciding what must be preserved." He ordered an iron-bound evidence chest brought from the records room. It had 2 separate locks set 6 inches apart. The justice gave one key to Tabitha and kept the other. Neither lock opened the chest alone. Tabitha placed the original holder inside. Pike added the constable's marked packet containing the decoy. The justice closed both locks in the presence of Mrs. Henshaw and entered the time in his book. "No one opens it without both keys and witnesses," he said. "That includes me." Tabitha slipped her key into the pocket beneath her waistband. "Good." Pike sent a wire to Glendive before noon asking for an experienced photographer with no connection to Miles City, Wren Livery, Reed Ashby, or the Morrow family. The answer named Silas Greer, 60 years old, proprietor of a small portrait room near the rail depot. He arrived on the afternoon train the next day carrying his own contact frame, paper, chemicals, and magnifying glass in a leather case worn smooth at the corners. He accepted no explanation of what the image was supposed to show. "Tell me what you want established," he said. Tabitha stood beside the locked chest. "Whether a fresh print made from this plate carries the same image as a sealed print created before the plate was stolen. That I can answer. I cannot tell you who killed whom when the plate was exposed or whether the man pictured committed a crime after the shutter closed. Then you understand the work. I understand its limits." The justice opened his lock. Tabitha opened hers. Greer examined the holder before touching it, then washed and dried his hands. He noted the old edgeware, the clouded silvering, Charles's scratched maker mark, and the crack at the upper corner. "Nothing here suggests a fresh image laid onto old glass," he said. "That is not the same as proving the plate dates from '74. "Understood," Tabitha said. Greer placed the original in his contact frame with paper from his own packet. The exposure required only measured light and patience. When he carried the paper into the darkened room and lowered it into the tray, no one spoke. The camera case surfaced first. Then the bent figures, bound wrists, the shutter cord running toward Charles Morrow's boot, the standing man with the damaged star. His narrow face and the mark near his brow emerged last. Greer washed the print and placed it on clean cloth. This image came from that plate. Pike left the room and returned with the sealed packet from his newspaper safe. The red wax remained whole. His signature crossed the join. Mrs. Henshaw identified her own name beneath Tabitha's. The justice inspected the seal before Pike broke it. Print B came free of the heavy paper. Greer placed it beside the fresh print. The crack shadow, the rope lines, the camera case, the chipped star, the facial features, and the shutter cord matched. Not generally, point for point. Malcolm stopped calling the image a fabrication. He began calling it irrelevant. The justice did not grant him that shelter. "This plate does not prove who fired the shots near North Platte," he said. "It does provide cause to inquire whether the men were bound, while an official account later called their deaths the result of escape. As to conduct in this county, the statements and physical evidence support holding Malcolm Wren and Arlen Goss to answer for taking the plate, assaulting Miss Morrow, locking her against her will, acting together to conceal or destroy evidence, and the weapon drawn during its recovery." Malcolm's lawyer asked for release on surety. No approved man offered property for him. Goss had no bondsman at all. The territorial authorities were notified, and both men remained in custody pending further proceedings. Nebraska received a second wire, stating that the original plate had been independently printed, and the earlier inquiry should be reopened. No murder verdict followed. No officer pretended one had. Dale Rusk appeared before the justice that same afternoon. His hand had healed enough to close, though 2 fingers remained stiff. He posted a peace bond for drawing on Tabitha at the courthouse and resigned from Wren's employ before the justice could ask whether he intended to return there. Nothing in the evidence tied him to the theft conspiracy, and Reed did not invent a charge to complete the story. Before Reed gave his own public statement, He placed 3 documents on Tabitha's work table. The first was a copy of his written account of every warning he had withheld. The second showed that the account had been entered into the county record. The third was a receipt from the territorial office, acknowledging that a copy had been sent beyond his control. "You filed these before speaking to me," Tabitha said, "before the photographer arrived. Why? Because whether you forgive me has nothing to do with whether the record should hold what I did." Her shoulder still ached when she breathed deeply. She touched none of the papers until she had read every line. Reed's statement did not say his plan had been reasonable. It said he had suspected Goss, failed to warn the person at risk, and allowed a private room to become part of an investigation without the owner's knowledge. Outside, Pike, Amos, Mrs. Henshaw, the constable, and several townspeople waited near the courthouse steps. Reed faced them without Malcolm's talent for turning explanation into command. "I suspected Deputy Goss before he entered Miss Morrow's rooms," he said. "I withheld that suspicion because I wanted proof of who he served. My silence gave him access he should not have had. Miss Morrow escaped the room he locked, preserved the remaining evidence, created the plan that recovered the original, and set the conditions under which we acted. The record will show that." No one applauded. A few men lowered their eyes. One woman, who had turned away from the studio weeks earlier, stood with her son beside the feed store corner. She listened, took $2 silver from her purse, and crossed the street toward Morrow Portrait Rooms. Tabitha met her at the bottom stair. The woman's mouth tightened with embarrassment. "My boy needs a likeness before his grandmother leaves for Iowa." "The posted price is $1 for the sitting," Tabitha said. "Half more if you want a second mounted print." The woman nodded. "Tomorrow, 10 o'clock. No apology was demanded. Paid work carried more weight. Near sunset on September 30, Reed came to the studio after the last customer had gone. Tabitha's shoulder had faded from black to yellow along the edge, though lifting her arm still pulled pain through the joint. Reed stopped near the doorway. He did not ask whether the men in custody made her feel safe. "Nebraska may take months," he said. "Longer if records are missing. I know, the plate may never tell us who fired. I know that too." He set his hat on the peg but did not remove his gun belt until Tabitha nodded toward it. Then he unbuckled it and placed it beside the posing cloth. "Your statement does not unlock the room Goss put me in," she said. "No, it does not make your silence harmless. No, and it does not make you the man who recovered the plate. I was not." Reed stood with both hands visible. "What is true in you matters to me more than whether I am allowed to think well of myself beside you." The words landed without asking for absolution. Tabitha crossed the studio until only a narrow space remained between them. Reed did not close it. "May I kiss you?" he asked. "Yes." She stepped the rest of the way. His hand settled at her waist, well below the injured shoulder. The kiss began with restraint, and deepened only when Tabitha lifted her right hand to the back of his neck and drew him nearer. Warmth moved through her without erasing memory. His mouth held no demand, only answer. When she eased back, he released her at once. Boots sounded on the stairs. The woman from the street arrived early with her son, both dressed for a portrait. Tabitha rested her forehead briefly against Reed's before turning toward the door. 10 o'clock was tomorrow, she said. "She may fear courage will leave overnight," Reed replied. Tabitha opened the studio. "Then we should not make her wait." By the first Monday in October, the woman who had once pulled her son away from Tabitha's stairs had returned twice and sent 3 other customers after her. Paid work traveled farther than apology. Morrow Portrait Rooms held 9 commission cards along the edge of the work table. A freight clerk and his wife, 2 soldiers bound east, a mother with twin daughters, Amos Bell in his best coat, and 3 horse owners who wanted proof their animals stood square before buyers sent money. Tabitha had enough in the cash box for paper, chemicals, winter coal, the next rent payment, and a month's reserve she did not intend to touch. The studio had not become prosperous in a miracle. It had become possible $1 at a time. Her left shoulder had nearly recovered. She could raise the arm above her head again, though cold mornings left a deep ache near the joint. She did not hide the stiffness from customers or let Reed interpret it as permission to manage her work. On October 1, Mrs. Henshaw climbed the stairs with the rent book tucked beneath one elbow. 6 Mondays, she said. Paid on time. You sound disappointed. I dislike revising an opinion before breakfast. She opened the book to a fresh page. The weekly arrangement made sense when you had $2 and a courthouse reputation. It makes less sense now. I will offer a 3-month lease beginning October 15th. Rent due by the quarter. You keep all studio earnings, including anything earned from lessons or outside work. Same rooms? Unless you have grown too grand for my plumbing. I have learned the bucket's character. Then we understand each other. Tabitha read the terms before signing. The quarter would run through January 14. She paid it in full from the studio account on October 10, leaving the reserve untouched. Mrs. Henshaw marked the page, blue sand across the ink, and handed Tabitha the receipt. No husband's name appeared on it. No promise of marriage stood behind the payment. On the front window, Tabitha replaced the temporary painted notice with permanent lettering. Morrow Portrait Rooms. The sign drew comment for 2 days and customers on the 3rd. Reed made none. He had already hired her to photograph 2 additional geldings at the posted price. When one print showed a shadow across the animal's rear leg, Tabitha rejected it and scheduled another sitting at no charge. Reed did not tell her the first was good enough. He brought the gelding back at the hour she named. The shutter hinge began dragging during that sitting. Reed noticed before she did. "Do you want me to mend it?" he asked. "You may tighten the lower screw. Leave the final adjustment to me." He took out a small driver, turned the screw twice, and stepped away. Tabitha tested the hinge, corrected the tension, and finished the plate. It was a small act. That was why it counted. By the 2nd week of October, 6 women had asked whether Tabitha would teach them to handle a revolver without embarrassment. She agreed to begin with 4 students on bare ground beyond the stock pens, where the bank rose behind the targets, and no road crossed the line of fire. Before anyone loaded a cartridge, Tabitha made each woman open the cylinder and examine every chamber herself. "Do not accept another person's word that a weapon is empty," she said. "Check it." A ranch wife with red hands asked whether courage meant drawing before fear took hold. "No," Tabitha replied. "Courage is knowing what lies beyond the target and refusing to shoot when you do not know." Another woman asked what to do when a man mocked her grip. "Let him waste his breath. A weapon is not an answer to ridicule." Reed kept mounted riders from drifting behind the earth bank because Tabitha had requested it. He did not stand inside the lesson, correct a stance, or introduce himself as the authority behind her. Afterward, he paid her for 2 mounted copies of the gelding print and reported a message from the territorial office before opening it. "The clerk says certified copies are complete," he told her. "The justice can return the original tomorrow if you agree to receive it then." "What does the territorial office retain?" "Certified copies of the fresh print, the plate description, the inventory, May's petition, the telegram, and the witness statements." "Nebraska?" "The same packet went by rail and post." "Pike's print B stays with his case papers." "And the original?" "Yours. Then I will receive it tomorrow." No one moved the plate before she said yes. On October 8, Tabitha and the justice opened the iron-bound chest together, both locks turned. Silas Greer's examination record, the decoy plate, and the original holder remained inside. The constable took custody of the decoy for the local case. The justice retained no key to Tabitha's property once the certified copies were complete. Tabitha lifted the wooden holder herself. In the studio, with Mrs. Henshaw and Pike watching, she opened it beneath north light. May's black paper remained folded around the glass. The upper corner crack had not widened. Charles's maker mark showed near the edge. Tabitha returned the original to its padded holder and placed it inside a bolted cabinet in the inner workroom. She kept the cabinet key on her person. Print B remained in Pike's file. The trial print stayed face down beneath clean paper in the studio. Print A existed only as ash. Reed never suggested the cabinet would be safer at Buffalo Coulee. He never asked Tabitha to move the studio nearer his horses, nor spoke of marriage as a solution to rent. Instead, he continued bringing her each official message before acting on it. One concerned Malcolm's request for release. Another concerned Goss's willingness to make a fuller statement if the territorial officer separated him from Malcolm. Reed told Tabitha what he knew, what he suspected, and what he intended to do. When time allowed, he asked what she wanted included in the record. On the evening of October 12, he arrived after the last customer left. Autumn wind pressed dry leaves along the boardwalk. Tabitha had banked the stove and covered the chemical trays. Reed removed his hat inside the doorway. "No official message tonight," he said. "Then why do you look as though one may arrest you? Because I have no badge to stand behind in this conversation." He unbuckled his gun belt and hung it on the wall peg. Tabitha remained beside the work table. "Go on." Reed did not begin with the ring. He kept both hands empty. "I love you." The words were direct enough to leave no shelter in politeness. "I love your judgment. I love that you show people as they are without making their wounds the only thing worth seeing. I love that you know when to fire and when not to." Tabitha felt the truth of it, not because he had named admirable qualities, but because she had watched him respect those qualities when they denied him control. "I love you too," she said. Reed drew one slow breath. "I want a life with you." "Then hear what that life requires." "I am listening." "The studio remains mine. The name on the window remains Morrow. My work continues after marriage. My revolver remains my property. If danger comes, you tell me what you know and what you fear. If there is time, you ask what I want. If there is no time, you stop the immediate harm and nothing more. Agreed. Do not agree because you think love makes you capable of never failing. I do not. Then what are you agreeing to? To tell the truth before I decide what you can bear. To listen before I call my plan protection. And when I fail, to put the failure where it can be seen." Tabitha studied him across the work table where May's petition had once lain rejected, and where Reed's self-report had later been placed without demand for forgiveness. "Where would we live?" she asked. "Where we decide. The studio does not move unless you want it moved. Buffalo Coulee does not become your duty because it is mine. I will not disappear into your ranch. I would not ask you to. You may someday want more time there than I do. Then we divide the days honestly. We can rent in town, keep a room at Buffalo Coulee, or find another arrangement after winter. I am asking for a shared life, not a surrendered one." Only then did Reed reach into his coat. He opened his hand between them. A narrow silver ring rested in his palm. He did not lift it toward her. "Will you marry me?" Tabitha did not answer at once. Freedom included the right to pause after love had already been spoken. She considered the winter ahead, the studio lease, the open Nebraska inquiry, the horses Reed would need to keep fed, and the man who had once mistaken secrecy for protection, but had since placed every costly truth in her hands before acting. "After winter," she said. "After the studio survives one full season. I keep Morrow for the business. We choose the home together." "Yes." That was not the answer. Reed's mouth softened. "Then ask me again. Will you accept those terms?" "Yes." Tabitha took the ring from his open palm and slid it onto her own finger. "Then yes, I will marry you." Reed did not reach for her until she crossed the space. She placed her right hand against his chest, where his badge would have rested if he had worn it, and lifted her face. "You may kiss your future wife." His hands settled at her waist after her permission. The kiss carried none of the urgency of danger, and none of the uncertainty of their first. Tabitha drew him closer, choosing both the tenderness and the heat beneath it. When they parted, the ring remained on the hand she had raised between them. She had once crossed 2 states, because a man promised her a room and called it a home. Now she stood in a studio paid for by her own work, with evidence locked under her key, and a future no one had arranged without her. She did not need marriage to make a life possible. That was why she could choose it. By April 20, 1884, the question was no longer whether Tabitha Morrow could survive in Miles City. It was whether marriage would leave the life she had built intact. The answer waited in 3 places: on the painted window of Morrow portrait rooms, in the bolted cabinet where her father's original negative rested beneath her key, and in the man standing outside the justice's office without asking her to surrender either one. Spring had softened the roads weeks earlier, but the ruts had dried enough for wagons again. Buffalo Coulee had come through winter with 2 broken fence lines, one lame gelding and no miracle profit. The studio had come through with rent paid through July 14, a full shelf of paper, and commission cards booked into May. Malcolm Wren remained in territorial custody after failing to secure acceptable surety. Arlen Goss had no bondsman. Both had been held to answer for the acts committed in Custer County, while the Nebraska inquiry reopened around the older deaths. No murder verdict had been issued. No honest person claimed otherwise. Reed's written failure remained in the county record as well. He had suspected danger, withheld it, and allowed Tabitha's rooms to become part of an investigation without her knowledge. The review had left him in office. It had not erased the account. Dale Rusk had posted a peace bond, left Wren's employ, and taken freight work east of town. The law had not made every truth complete. It had made several lies harder to revive. Tabitha stood in Mrs. Henshaw's front room while the older woman tied a narrow blue ribbon at the collar of the gray dress. The hem had been cleaned and repaired. The travel-worn braid had been removed. Nothing about the dress pretended it had waited untouched for a happier ceremony. "You could have bought another," Mrs. Henshaw said. "I could have, and chose this one. I chose what remained useful." Mrs. Henshaw stepped back. "That answer will either make a fine marriage or exhaust the sheriff. Both may be true." The silver ring Reed had given her in October caught the morning light. He had not asked her to marry sooner. Through winter, he had continued reporting every message connected to the case, before acting when time allowed. When the territorial clerk requested another certified copy, Tabitha saw the request first. When Goss offered a fuller statement in exchange for being housed away from Malcolm, Reed told her before answering. When a county man suggested that married custody would be simpler if the negative moved into Reed's office, Reed had replied that marriage did not transfer the plate. He had not told Tabitha about the remark as proof of virtue. He had told her because it concerned her property. Mrs. Henshaw opened the door. "He is waiting." Reed stood on the boardwalk in a dark coat brushed free of dust. His badge was pinned beneath the lapel rather than displayed. Amos Bell waited near the courthouse steps in his best coat, the scar on his cheek visible and unsoftened. Edwin Pike held the marriage register copy the justice had asked him to witness. No crowd gathered. A freight wagon passed behind them. Two boys rolled a hoop along the street until Mrs. Henshaw ordered them away from a mud hole. Reed watched Tabitha approach without coming down the steps to take her arm. "You are certain?" he asked. "Yes, so am I." "Then let us not turn certainty into a speech." The justice received them in the same room where Malcolm and Goss had first been held to answer. The iron-bound evidence chest stood empty against the record's wall, both locks open. It had served its purpose and no longer held what belonged to Tabitha. Mrs. Henshaw, Amos, and Pike took their places as witnesses. Reed removed his hat. Tabitha kept hers off. The justice opened the register. "Tabitha Morrow, do you enter this marriage by your own will?" "I do." "Has any promise of shelter, money, property, or protection been made a condition of your answer?" "No." Reed's gaze stayed on her face, but he did not interrupt. "Reed Ashby, do you enter this marriage by your own will?" "I do." "Do you understand that marriage gives you no authority over property she does not choose to transfer?" "I do." Tabitha glanced at the justice. "You improved the wording. Experience improves most legal forms after it embarrasses them." The vows were brief: fidelity, honesty, shared labor, no obedience, no promise that either could prevent every harm. Reed's voice remained steady when he said he would tell the truth before deciding what Tabitha could bear. Tabitha promised to speak her refusal before resentment could make a home of it. The justice pronounced them married. Reed waited. Tabitha took his hand first. He bent toward her only after she lifted her face, and the kiss was brief enough for Mrs. Henshaw to claim respectability remained in the room. Pike signed as witness. Amos signed beneath him. Tabitha wrote Tabitha Morrow in the register. The justice examined the name, then passed the pen to Reed without comment. Reed signed Reed Ashby below it. Outside, no one stopped the town. A livery bell rang. A train whistle carried from the depot. Amos shook Reed's hand and told Tabitha his portrait had helped him secure a winter freight contract because the company clerk said he appeared dependable. "I was dependable before the picture," Amos added. The picture only made the clerk notice. "That is often the work," Tabitha said. Mrs. Henshaw kissed her temple and informed Reed that marriage did not lower the rent. "I would be concerned if it did," he answered. By noon the witnesses had gone, and Tabitha locked the studio door behind herself and her husband. The word did not diminish the room. North light spread across the work table, camera stand, and painted backdrop. Inside the bolted cabinet, the original negative remained in its padded holder beneath May's black paper. Print B stayed with Pike's case papers. Certified copies remained beyond Malcolm's reach. Tabitha set a fresh glass plate into the camera and uncoiled the long release cord she had made for the sitting. Reed studied the 2 marks she had placed on the floor. "Where do you want me?" "Beside the chair." "Not behind me." He took the left mark. Tabitha adjusted the focus, then crossed to the cabinet where she kept the walnut-gripped revolver. She removed it, opened the cylinder, and laid 6 cartridges one by one into a wooden tray. Brass clicked against wood. She checked each chamber herself, turned the empty cylinder, and placed the unloaded weapon on a shelf outside the frame. Reed unbuckled his gun belt and set it on the opposite shelf. Then he removed his coat so the concealed badge would not appear. "No lawman in the portrait?" he asked. "A lawman may stand there. The badge does not need to stand for him. And no armed bride, no armed anyone." She returned beneath the focusing cloth. Reed's image appeared inverted on the ground glass. The empty chair sat behind and between them, useful but unclaimed. She adjusted the camera until the space on each side matched. "Turn slightly toward me." Reed turned too far. "Back," he corrected. "You enjoy commanding me in this room. I enjoy competence in every room. That explains less of your affection than I hoped." Tabitha came from behind the camera and laid the end of the cord near her right boot. She took her mark beside him, leaving a small distance between their shoulders. Their hands hung separately. "Ready?" Reed asked. "Not yet." Tabitha turned her right palm upward. Reed placed his hand into hers only after the invitation. His fingers closed gently. She drew the cord tight with the edge of her boot. The shutter opened. Measured light entered the lens. They held still, 2 people occupying equal space. The shutter closed. "Agatha said." She reset the plate and returned to her mark. This time she stepped closer before Reed moved. Their joined hands rested between them. Tabitha lifted her face until her forehead touched his. Reed stayed still, his breath warm against her cheek. She drew the cord. The shutter opened once more, carrying light across the glass where no wrist was bound and no figure stood above another. When the exposure ended, Tabitha released the cord but not his hand. Reed brushed his thumb once across her knuckles. "Mrs. Ashby?" he asked. "Not in the studio." "Mrs. Morrow? That was my mother. Tabitha then. Always." She lifted her head and kissed him because she chose the final closeness the camera would not keep. Later, in the darkroom, the image emerged beneath her hands. No bride being claimed, no sheriff standing guard, only 2 adults in equal light, their empty hands joined between them.